Okay, so welcome everyone to today's Gauss Fireside chat about the future of DeFi, what it looks like, and what are some innovations that are pushing the boundaries of this space. If you are new to DeFi or you are curious about where the space might be heading, this is a great fireside chat to be involved in. Like always, this will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel later on today. And if you have any questions for our guests, feel free to write them out in our Q&A board, where we will answer them after the discussion period. So without further ado, we have three amazing guests that have been in DeFi for quite a while. So I'm going to introduce them, and for whoever I introduce, just feel free to give a short introduction about yourself. But first of all, we're gonna have Drew Wolfer from Wolfer Finance here on stage. So Drew, welcome to the Goss stage, and feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Obviously, incredibly humbling that people want to get my opinion and invite me to things like this to talk about DeFi. So definitely appreciate that. Started up Wolfer Finance, kind of made my bones doing other businesses in the real world. Had an e-commerce business, a import-export business, a distribution business, stuff like that. Kind of automated those a little bit. Had a little bit of extra time, so I started, dabbling in crypto back in like 2014. And I started getting into master nodes and like real master nodes, not the fake ones like strong block and stuff like that. So I don't want that to get misconstrued. But yeah, I got into like Flux, and I had a SRX node, just stuff like that. And I was like hosting them, and then a couple of my friends knew that I was doing that, and they were like, "Oh, hey, you should come look at these nodes they're coming out with." This was last November and December, and I looked at them and I was just like, "These aren't nodes, man." And they were like, "No, they're nodes." And then I got in the discords, and everybody was swearing up and down that these were nodes, like master nodes, and I was like, "Nah, that's just a keyword. They're just keywording you to sell you on something." And so I kind of sprung my YouTube channel out of that and kind of ripped through DeFi. And then everybody was like, "Oh, you're so smart, do one yourself." And I was like, "Okay, Wolfer Finance, Chronos Validator, FTM Validator, AVAX Validator, let's go." So yeah, it's been a wild ride, man. And now we're launching Presend, the wallet transaction security software. So I just kind of wanted to be the change, the face of the change in the space. Like they always say, like, it's kind of cliche, be the change that you want to see in the world. Well, I wanted to be the face of this pivot, or at least one of the faces of this pivot. So that's what I've tried to do, and that's what I strive to do every day. So again, thanks guys for having me come in here, and yeah, humble appreciation from my side.
Oh, thank you, Drew. Yeah, for I think a lot of people who might be coming into this space might have heard of Strongblock. They were based on I guess a Ponzi-nomic scheme, but I'm not gonna get too into that. But you are definitely a true inspiration, and being that change that people want to be is definitely very inspiring. So next up we have Degen, and Degen, he is from Management of DeFi. So just feel free to introduce yourself, and you can speak up on Management of DeFi as well.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you guys for allowing me to come here. I'm Degen from Management of DeFi. Essentially, we are a powerhouse of kind of anywhere from the retail investor side to the development side of things. So, I mean, investor side, we do like risk assessment on projects, where we kind of break down tokenomics and teach people what to look for, things of that nature. And then on the project development side, I mean, we can develop projects, or we offer KYC audit services, marketing services. So we try to cover pretty much everything the in between from the investor side as well as the project development side as well.
Amazing. How long would you say you guys have been in the space for? If
Uh, Kind of since well, we've been in this space longer, but we kind of started Management of DeFi around the beginning of the year.
No, that's amazing, and just helping out the community is a very amazing job. And I've seen your website, and I've seen the work that you've done, and it's really good. It's really amazing. So
Yeah.
last but not sorry, last but not least, we have Atlas. And Atlas, he is from CryptoLink. So Atlas, feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Atlas. I am with CryptoLink, which is a rebrand we're doing. So formerly Printer Financial. Uh, I've been in engineering for decades, security, DevOps, engineering, even dabbled in agile coaching. I don't recommend. So I've seen pretty much everything. My weakness is front end, of course, but we can't all be good at everything. My journey in crypto started very long time ago. I believe my first purchase of a BTC was somewhere around $65. I can pull up the receipt to get the exact amount. But I've been around the space for a while. DeFi, I would say maybe past year and a half now, and it was really back in February that I kind of seen the need for the CryptoLink project. So at the core, what we are is a cross-chain messaging service, and the inspiration from that was really twofold. Number one, all the security issues that has happened on all of the bridges and still continues to happen based on the way that they're fundamentally engineered, and the costs associated with it. Bridging is right now more towards people with mid to larger size wallets. So for instance, you wanted to take $20, $50 across chains, you're going to lose most of that in fees. And yeah, very happy to be here.
No, thank you for being here. And I just wanted to reiterate, you bought Bitcoin at $65?
I think it was like 65.40. Yes.
So it's safe to say that you made a pretty good investment into
Well,
that, I guess.
it may or may not have been to play poker.
No worries. I think no worries about that. We'll talk about that later on. But of course, we have Gary here. Gary is a founder and CEO of Gauss, and he's going to lead the discussion away.
Yeah, thanks for all that, Alex, and thank you guys for joining us today. I wanted to talk today about DeFi, where it is now and where we think it's going, right? And that's why I wanted a kind of diverse group for today's conversation, because there's a lot of different areas in this space, and I think we could start with Degen and Management of DeFi, because you guys have a higher level oversight in a lot of projects. You guys are working on rating projects and, like you said, a lot of different areas. So where DeFi has been in the last couple of years, since 2018, I guess, the last big bull at that point, that big cycle, into now, and what do you think it's going to look like in the next, 2 to 5 years? Just as a high level question there.
All right. Yeah. So, basically since then, I think, if you take into account adoption, has been increasing, obviously. So I think, you got a lot of more people into DeFi. And I always kind of mention, especially around the COVID time, it was kind of, in my opinion, the perfect parameters for DeFi and crypto, because you had governments, printing money, and advising people to stay home, which kind of drove, a huge DeFi wave, and crypto. But and in other aspects, I think you have a lot of innovation happening and teams and people, trying out different ideas, kind of seeing what works and what doesn't. I think that will continue. And I mean, in terms of long term, I think it hugely is dependent on obviously macro, which I mean at the moment is not great, but also how the government handles regulations with crypto going forward. That's kind of what I would say is those two things are very dependent on the future of DeFi, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. Drew or Atlas, either you have thoughts on a very high level topic as a start way to kick us off into this?
Yeah, I would say it really centers around regulations, and that is a hard part because we're dealing with a currency that really has no borders, has no loyalty to any jurisdiction. So I really think the the regulatory kickoff is probably going to start either in the States, most likely Europe, some big, a block is going to kick that off. But then I think we'll quickly start seeing regulations come in. And as we start seeing this regulations come in, the people that may have just been sitting on the sidelines watching, I think would be more enticed to get in. So you'll start to see more, institutional investors. You'll start to see even more mom and pops, investing in through their stock accounts. Like we have been seeing. But I think for that to really go mainstream, it's all dependent on the regulations.
Yeah, I'd agree. And our very first actual, GFC, our first fireside chat that we had was with 4 different attorneys where we spoke about crypto law regulations, because it is something that is going to shape this space. My opinion is that we're going to see a lot of push. We're already seeing that with the SEC, FinCEN, things like that in the US and different agencies globally. But there's going to get to a point where I think the moneyed interests want to get into this space and, that institutional money, and push back pretty hard on regulators because they don't want to see a large migration, right, of these projects outside the US and outside whatever other country. My opinion on that one. So, Drew, on yours with Wolfer Finance,
Yep.
Your approach is different than a lot of other projects, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You're working, let's talk about what you're working on, right? You have an NFT, correct?
Yep. Absolutely.
And those NFTs give their holders a benefit, like as a single use case here. Those holders get benefits as part of a shared treasury sort of situation, correct?
Yeah, they do. So it's kind of like twofold. It's essentially, it's kind of a hard thing to describe, right? Because we're in such this like weird, what I would call limbo status, where you don't know what they're going to do in the future. So you do everything like preventatively to plan for that, right? You don't have any idea what the SEC is going to do. So all you can really do is talk to your lawyers and make sure that you're passing all of the Howie stuff, that you're offering things up in the proper manner, structuring things properly and stuff like that. So with Wolfer, the main thing for a lot of these is like not being classified as, like, say, a hedge fund, is removing the ability for people to just come and go as they please, taking money out of the institution, right? Which is where the NFTs come in, because the NFTs still hold an intrinsic value that is kind of tied to the value of our treasury, right? Of the assets that we hold. And with these all being like long-term assets, I kind of describe this as more of a, kind of like an on-chain real estate company. And then there's a few other like kind of proprietary ways that, well, not proprietary, I guess, just ways that other people aren't really thinking of to combat that type of regulation in the future. And Wolfer Finance has implemented all of them from inception, essentially, and tried to front run it, essentially. So with the way that we have it structured right now, you bought an asset, which was an NFT. You relinquish, it's like going to the store and buying a Snickers, right? You pay their $1 for your Snickers. The store keeps the $1. You keep the Snickers. You go do whatever you want with it. If you want to sell it to the next guy down the road, you can. So that's kind of what Wolfer Finance did. And then we went out and actually procured validator nodes like FTM, Flux, we have DAG soft nodes, stuff like that, ETH validators, basically everything. If people are interested, they can go check out the treasury. It's pretty wild what we have already. And essentially, we are compounding this through the bear market. And then once payout structure starts coming, each NFT gets paid out the exact same as every other NFT. There's no tiering, there's no frills and spills, none of that weird stuff. There was no guarantee of returns, none of that. And then also offering them access to other things via the NFT is a huge way that you combat that regulation. Because NFTs, in my opinion, have been misused, and they were more supposed to be utilized for like memberships and tracking and like deeds of houses and just stuff like that, like transfer of assets. And I think a lot of these projects kind of use them frivolously for everything. So yeah, that's kind of how Wolfer Finance is doing everything to combat all of that regulation, because I'm all for regulation. I don't have a problem with the regulation as much as I think most people do, because I know that with regulation comes widespread adoption faster. So it's kind of like not having laws, right? And then people can just murder people and do whatever they want. Obviously, we don't want that. And we're seeing how that has played out, just leaving people to their own devices in the DeFi markets as is. So I'm kind of like banking on regulation to come in, especially in the US. I'm not necessarily looking forward to it, but we have done everything that we can in the background and incorporated in, places that have to give you X amount of time to get compliant. Because the way I've described it to people is, even if they do try to classify you and say, oh, you did this, blah, blah. Well, if it wasn't already like that, it's like if you're wearing a purple shirt today and then they say purple shirts are outlawed tomorrow. Well, you can't get arrested for wearing a purple shirt yesterday if there was no law, and then they have to give you ample time to dispose of your purple sneak in proper manner that they deem necessary, right? This is no different, where they have to give us time to reach compliance because we had no idea what their, laws or regulations were essentially going to be.
Right. I mean, that's similar to our approach with what we're doing with our Ferro cards. It's, it works within the current legal and regulatory framework, because we can't just have a token sale right now. That would make us a security. We can sell NFTs that have an existing use case, meets their checkboxes for that, and then we can give our token to those holders. I think most people in the space at a higher level do agree that some regulation needs to happen. I would like to see sensible regulation. I think that's something we can all agree on as well. So definitely interesting. Atlas, I wanted to ask you, because you're in an area with CryptoLink that, in my opinion, is, and we've spoken about this, but is one of the biggest areas of risk, being bridges between ecosystems. We have to have interoperability, right? And there's a lot of challenges in that. We've seen countless bridge hacks over the last, few years, and you're working on a solution for that. So I'd like to hear your take on that, like what you're building right now, and then where you see that going again in the next few years.
Yeah. Very good question, because I really see the future of crypto as breaking down the barriers between all of these chains. So, we started out with Bitcoin. So that's crypto 1.0. It kind of proved the concept. Ethereum came online, made things a little smarter, 2.0. But now we're seeing all of these other chains, and there's so many chains, it's hard to keep up with. It's hard to explore them, but they all have components that are maybe unique or maybe revolutionary in their own way. So I really think that adding more chains as we go, we're going to see that into the future, for sure. And as long as we can incorporate all of these different chains into one ecosystem where, it's the same as, being inside of on a single chain, swapping between different projects and tokens. If that same sort of maneuverability mobility was in existence between chains, it would actually, in my opinion, spur innovation, because you would have the chance to see the technologies of these other chains, and it would increase the adoption. It also decreases risk. So like you mentioned, the security risk on the bridge, that's not the only risk when dealing with chains. You can have a chain fail. You can have other events on chains that could be negative. So if your project is only on one chain, you really have all your eggs in one basket when you really don't need to at this time. If your project is on multiple chains, you're really spreading out that risk to the entire project from any black swan event happening on any single chain, maybe even two chains. And the security, you're right, that is a very big thing. So what we've done is we took a different approach. We actually started the project because of all of the security issues and costs, but security was a big thing. And what we did was design a system that we decentralized that trust back down to the projects. So as a bridge ourselves, we are basically only transferring information across the different chains, but at no point in time does any project or user actually have to trust us. The trust still stays with the project itself. So there's no whitelisting, no permissions, no keys ever given to us. And I think that's a good way to move forward, so that again, not all of your eggs, all of your tokens are in the same bridge basket. We really decentralize that trust right back down to the protocols, which I think makes everything more secure.
Yeah, it's definitely a different approach. And I'm interested to see how that evolves over time, again, as we've spoken about. Degen, this next one I want to ask for you. The Management of DeFi, you and a number of other projects in, I'm going to say, this orbit, right? We all know a lot of the same people, a lot of the same projects. And I think a lot of them are moving in this direction of creating more integrity across the entirety of the blockchain space, right? I don't think that's ever something we're going to see fully accomplished personally in chains like Ethereum and whatnot. That's not why they exist. They exist as sandboxes to be built in. But what is your take on your role and the role of projects like yours in regards to the accountability of DeFi, the security, oversight sort of things?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So, from our side, obviously, we try to offer basically every security service that a project can need. I mean, we even do multi-sig services, things such as that nature. And like I said, educating the investors on that side so they know what to look for. And I mean, over the past short term, we've seen the space grow, and they're starting to know what to look for. But I would agree with what you were saying, in terms of like Ethereum, maybe even BNB. I think it'll always at some level be a cat and mouse game, which it kind of creates a paradox because DeFi is decentralized, right? So you do have those that want to stay, they want to keep it 100% decentralized and have all be anonymous and things of that nature. So that's where I see it kind of staying a cat and mouse game. And I think some people will continue on with that, and others might not. But from our side, we just keep trying to grow and build and provide. If there's any new service that we can provide that adds extra security, we're always looking for those as well. So,
yeah, I mean, it is going to be a cat and mouse game. That's, again, going back to what we're building, a curated ecosystem. That's part of what we get to solve for, right out the gate, being that gated ecosystem. Another question for all of you, and I really want to talk about the future of DeFi, right? Because I personally have a vision of where I think this entire space will be, whatever we want to call it. I think it all ties in together, the blockchain industry, cryptos, DeFi, Web3, and the metaverse. It is all in one big bubble, right? And I think in 5 to 10 years, we're going to see this space hit mass adoption easily before that time, but really watching every aspect, businesses, consumer product groups, everything in this space, in a metaverse, in that interchangeable, interoperable space where you're traveling from one chain to another. You have assets going across. There's a lot of risk vulnerability there, but that's all kind of what we're building toward, I think. Does anyone have a counterpoint or something they want to comment on, like the 5-10 year metaverse, big, hairy, audacious goal of the entire industry?
Goal is I agree with you. I think there's going to be much bigger players that are going to come in and try and take over the positions of a lot of us smaller guys, right? So like in the case of Wolfer Finance, right? We're a smaller master noding company. We probably any given time have, depending on price fluctuations, anywhere from $2 to $3 million of assets under management, right? Where we're master noding X amount of validators, blah, blah, blah. So when regulation comes and institutions come, we know what happens, right? The little guys get forced out, and the big, well, it's not necessarily that they get forced out. They just, all of our ideas get stolen. They get taken to a much larger scale, and then it kind of makes us obsolete, right? Because these larger scale institutions come in. I mean, look at, Facebook literally changed their name to Meta. So it wouldn't surprise me if Goldman Sachs comes out with Goldman validators or some stuff like that. I don't know. But I see a lot of corporatization taking over this market whenever it gets that certain level of adoption, because that's just, for lack of a better term, that's just how the world works right now, man. So I could definitely see them coming in and basically taking the majority of our market share. We're seeing it right now where JP Morgan is trying to come out with JP coin, right? The United States is trying to come out with essentially what you would call a cashless currency with Fed coin. You've got PayPal allowing essentially people to buy and sell crypto on PayPal. You've got BitPay coming in, giving people crypto credit cards. Where does that put the mom and pops, right? The Wolfer Finances of the world? I don't know. But what I do know is that with a 4% global adoption rate, we're all good, at least for the next couple of years. But in bull markets, it seems like the market triples. And in bear markets, it seems like it basically anywhere from 60 to 100% increase. So if we've got a 4% global adoption rate right now, by next year it could be 8%. If we get into a bull run in 2024, it could be 20% very quickly. And that's where the institutions start coming in and kind of, bulldozing us. So that's just kind of where I see it going.
See, this is one of the reasons I wanted this group. I actually thought there was going to be disagreement amongst us, and I think that's healthy and should be encouraged in this space, because I actually disagree with you. I personally, they're going to try to. Meta's going to dump tens of billions of dollars into development, and that's amazing for this space. They're putting money into hard tech that we can't. No small project can advance at the rate they're doing with things like hard tech. Downside for them is that, Zuckerberg's already come out and stated they want a 50% transaction fee for Meta, which won't, in my opinion, be sustainable, because you're going to have others out there, solutions like Gauss, so every other blockchain who's not taking a 50% transaction fee right off the top. And those large bloated infrastructures, unless they are able to be adroit, agile, adopt rapidly, and evolve into this space, adopt new things in the space, they're not going to be sustainable. They're going to, in my opinion, like Steam, will probably go the way of Blockbuster unless they're capable of evolving. And I don't think they will be. Degen.
One good thing.
Yeah,
one good thing about that is even if they do try to do that, what they're really doing is they're exposing a whole group of people to the concept of crypto without really getting them into the depths of it. So it's a really low barrier of entry, which may actually see the adoption of crypto in general grow. So I think it is a healthy thing. And also the technologies that they develop, just like they can steal, the little guy's technology, the little guys can steal their technology. So I think I like to actually see that innovation come in from the guys, the big players, but also that I think that will help kick off the mass adoption. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, chains like Gauss and some of these other ones, why would you pay 50% transaction fee? But you might pay it if you didn't know any better.
Right.
But eventually you get educated to that. So I really think it's a good onboarding for the moms and pops.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So, my take on it is, I'm not going to say it's going to go one way or the other. I'm going to say that I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And just to, I guess, focus or funnel into the original question. I say that because you're talking about huge corps that are completely centralized, trying to step into decentralized space. You know what I mean? Where I do feel like some people claim that they like decentralized, but really only care about price action. But ultimately, I do think there is a huge demographic of people who share the same decentralization ideologies. And so that's kind of where I'm like, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Because I think they might get some of the share, but I I think they're going to try to come at it in a centralized way. And your core decentralized people aren't going to go. They're not going to be okay with that.
Right, and I think that's kind of what we're building toward because, Gauss is centralized. There's no two ways to say that. That's how we are a curated permissioned ecosystem. But we're doing it from a very decentralized or DeFi mindset. I've said many times that I want to see the decentralization of revenue streams, right? I want to see more money going back to the builders and to the communities with not a huge handout in the middle that Steam marketplace taking 30+% or Android or Apple, Facebook, you name it, they all have that massive hand in the middle taking a huge chunk. Every platform, YouTube, TikTok, you name it. They built the platform, sure, but they're taking the massive lion's share when the actual creators, the ones who make their platform have value, those network effects, they get the leavings afterwards. Not to say Mr. Beast is, not doing well, but for like him as an example, he should be pulling in a massive chunk more of revenue than he is. And I think in the future, someone like that will end up with a much larger portion of the value that they create. And that's we act in a like intersection in this space, right? We Gauss want mass adoption. We want to bring in big brands. We want to see them spend their marketing dollars with tokenized campaigns, where a lot of that goes directly to consumers. Yes, our revenue model is transactional, but like at what percent? Like less than 1? Seeing other big corporates, entities, Web 2 entities and older try to come in and compete with that, they just can't. So
Right.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also touch on, I guess, because right now, like, we're on DeFi and everyone's like, oh, this and that is decentralized. And I guess a perfect example was Tornado Cash, right? Because yes, technically, these things are happening on chain, but if you have any sort of DApp or website, that's on a Web 2 platform being hosted on Web 2, right? So if the government doesn't like it, as we saw, they can completely shut that down. Right. At some level, yeah, it is somewhat decentralized, but I would go on to say pretty much nothing is in DeFi is fully decentralized. I mean, obviously, maybe you consider Bitcoin, but beyond that, like, it's still hosted on mainly, Web 2 applications.
Right, I agree. And during that whole tornado thing that happened right before our very first one of these where we spoke with those attorneys. And Jonathan Dunsmore and I had been talking about it just a couple days after it happened. I mentioned this during that one too, that those regulators weren't going to succeed the way they wanted to with that sanction because somebody was going to come through and just dust everyone. If they're sanctioning any wallet that was touching Tornado, that's the easiest way to fuck with regulators and individual people, celebrity, whatever, is just to dust a ton of wallets. And that's exactly what happened a week later. And then I also said that we were going to watch a number of clones spin up, a number of which wouldn't be as reputable, which is destroying that space, that those transactions, the trust that people built with that as a platform and everything else, which again is exactly what happened. And it's the first time the US government also attacked code that directly, sanctioning code, because it was protected First Amendment speech from the 90s, that case was. But yeah. What other topics do you guys want to talk about? Anyone want to touch on something specific to you, your project? I've been leading this, but I'm curious to see where you guys want to take this conversation. Atlas, got anything?
I mean, I think you did touch on a good thing with the regulations, and to maybe add one twist to that. So some of these hacks actually have to do with manipulating the code. So if we start to talk about smart contracts as the rules of the game, is there really a such thing as hacking a smart contract?
Well, yes and no. I don't think, personally, this is a stance of my own. A lot of people in this space believe in the immutability of all things, right? And I disagree with that. I think blockchains themselves and smart contracts need to be upgradable because nobody wants an operating system or a game that you can never update. The blockchain itself should remain immutable. Like, I disagree with 721R, the EIP that's being proposed, and 1155R, and ERC20R, I think, is also being proposed, where they're allowed to roll back, right? I don't think that's going to pass in Ethereum, and I don't think it should. I do believe that the immutability of the blockchain, I'm not going to call it sacred or sacrosanct or something like that, but that's what this space is. That is what it is built on, right? It's a database that you can't update or delete. You only have create, read. And I think that's important to maintain. But smart contracts and blockchains, I disagree. I think they should be upgradable, alterable, because over time things need to change.
I absolutely agree with that a lot, because that's where we have all these other chains and all these other projects springing out of nowhere, trying to one up the last one and stuff like that, where those same exact projects could come in as advisors on those, and they could be upgraded, right? To where, because it will spiral out of control, it will snowball to where there's 8,000 different chains, which is pretty much already is, right? And it starts to become where it's like in the real world, right? We basically have Apple and Android. Okay, so it's like, all right, choose whichever one you like, but it's not like that in this world. And we have the same pitfalls, but it's across a much broader spectrum, right? Instead of just saying like, oh, I need to have a computer program that makes sure that whenever an Apple computer desktop sends to my Microsoft, that it just converts to Excel, right? Or vice versa. But with us in crypto, it's much different. It's where, it's kind of like what Atlas is building over there, where all of these chains need to be interoperable to a certain extent. I get it. Everybody wants to have their reason for being, right? And they all, and I'm sure they all do. But at the end of the day, the interoperability, that's all bullshit, because everybody's losing a ridiculous amount of money on that stuff. And it's kind of annoying, which is where that's how Pretense sprung out of, because there was no solution for this And that kind of just goes to the overall broad cryptocurrency market topic, which is, why was there no solution like this? Well, because it's really just much easier to just go do a tomb fork, dump $500,000 worth of tokens on your investors, hide behind a mask, and make that money the same way than actually having to go out and do something real, do something that's difficult, right? And, just go make a rebasing token. It's much easier, right? So I think because of the Wild West nature of the cryptocurrency markets, it opens the market up to real business people, such as the people that are on this call, to come in and actually innovate it and show how a real solution should be brought to the market, instead of all of this kind of like fugazi, just, I don't know, fluff that everybody's been, all this hopium that everybody's been selling everybody, and people are drinking the Kool-Aid all day. But I think now we're seeing that the chickens are coming home to roost, where if you don't have a real solution, what's the point? And that's kind of my whole point with these blockchains. It's like, all right, did you just basically fork another blockchain? That's what some of these people are doing, right? Or are you actually putting millions of dollars into this developing your own blockchain, similar to what Gauss is doing? There's a lot of chains out there that are just like, oh, I'll just fork Binance Smart Chain, or I'll just fork whatever, and come out with that. So this interoperability mess that we're running into is giving, I'm cool right now, because at the end of the day, that gives my project a good use case for being here, right? But it is an issue, and it does need to be solved eventually, where I think the market's going to have to reel that in and say, look, we can only have a few here, guys. Like, you can't, like, and that starts to get into that centralized control aspect of it, but it's not necessarily centralized control. It's more of just like a hive mind mentality, where it's like, all right, are you guys tired of just randomly losing $200? Are you tired of having to go to this place and swap onto this exchange and onto this chain and all this mess that we've essentially created ourselves? There's no organization to this. So that's where a lot of these other solutions need to come in and make this thing organized, right? Because this is the Wild West. It's ran by a bunch of devs that don't necessarily know organization, business, structure, delegation, stuff like that. And it's like, if everybody would just stay in their lane and do what they do, I think this space would be a lot better. And I know that's a very unpopular opinion, because, we're starting to get the generation coming into this where all the kids' moms were telling them, you can be anything that you want to be. You can do anything that you want. And let's just be real. There can only be one president, right? So no, you can't just do anything you want and be anything you want, because there's only a certain amount of things out there for you to do, and you only have a certain skill set. So, with that being said, it's like, we have to find a way to usher the boomers in, the ones that were telling the kids that. We're the same kids that they were telling that are the kids that are messing up the market that we're trying to usher them into, because all these people are about to start retiring. And my bias is that they're probably tired of the stock market paring their gains every friggin' year to year and a half. And with inflation the way that it is, even if they get an 8% return, they still have the same exact amount of money that they had last year, right? So we got to figure out a way to usher these people in, because if we can't, and we can't make them feel safe, because they've been safe for a long time just with their brokers, right? They know that they can give them their money and it's all good, right? It's not like that in crypto. So we have to figure that out, and then we can get that adoption, right?
So to touch on a few things, one, I want to be very clear that what we're doing with Gauss is, you were talking about forking other chains and whatnot. Our launch
that's
is
not you.
What's that?
I wasn't referring to you at all in that.
I mean, you'd mentioned it, and I think it's worth just briefly touching on so there's no misconception, because I do believe in a very high degree of transparency with what we're doing, our plans, what we're building, and everything. At launch, we are actually launching on a lot of open source code. And then we're building from there, right? This is our MVP. the launch ecosystem, and then we get to build toward cool shit with Gauss 2.0, our NFT protocols, Omnipool, all that fun stuff. So I wanted to say that. I also think interoperability and multi-chain is going to stay. I would use the early internet as examples here. Most people didn't see a use in ever having a website. And then you had very few that people existed on, and people are like, we don't need 50 websites. Well, how many? Like, we have millions now. I'm not saying necessarily there's going to be millions of blockchains, but that is like the future has a non-0% chance of existing where there are an incredibly high number of blockchains. Sure, there's going to be a core number that are used. Google, Facebook, a number of other websites are the primary used websites, but there's millions and millions out there. And I think blockchains are going to be kind of similar once we see some sort of unifying protocol that allows for interoperability and communication between chains more fluidly, more seamlessly, more trust, with a higher degree of trust. That's
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I think you really hit on it there. And the Google was really, I still remember a time before Google. I still remember dialing up to BBSs.
IRC.
Oh yeah, well that was much later. Like I still remember the what I think I had a 14.4 baud. Yeah, I remember the dial-up sound.
Yep.
But before, when the web was exploding, it really was kind of chaotic. And I even remember different magazines coming out with website directories like a phone book. Trying to manage all these websites, like you would look up in paper what website to go to. So then we had all these different search engines that popped up, and Google ended up being the winner. But that was the portal that linked everything together. And I kind of like to think that's what we're doing. By linking all these chains together, by allowing these swaps and all that to be frictionless. Like I think this whole space is going to get a lot smaller as these interlinks become more commonly used.
I hear what you guys are saying. My thought process is that this is just my opinion. My opinion is that the chains are more like the actual, like a browser or the Google, right? And then the individual website is going to be like all of the projects that pop up on said chain, browser, whatever it may be. So I'm speaking in a lot more of a broad level, from a more broad level perspective, because basically the chains are the things that make everything happen. Without the chain, there's nothing. So it's kind of like with the internet. Without the browser, there's nothing that happens. There's no projects, right? There's no websites, none of that stuff. So I was speaking in more of a broad term. I do understand kind of where you're going with it, but I see the chains as kind of being that functionality that make all of that happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, and nobody has a crystal ball. Go ahead, Degen.
Yeah, so I mean, from my side, I can see both sides. Because obviously you have like you guys were mentioning, FANG companies, Google, Meta, if you will, whatever. But on the other side, I'm talking to you using a certain ISP. You're probably using a different ISP. And do I care which ISP you're using for me to be able to talk to you right now? No, I don't. So I can kind of see both sides of it. And then in aspects of the future of DeFi, I think, especially right now in this bear, I think utility is where the innovation really stems from. Kind of with like what Drew was talking about with pre-send. We kind of have our own utility in the works as well. So I'm just seeing a lot more of non-Ponzi-nomic utility projects come out, which I love and think is great, and the space needs more of, personally. So that's just short term for right now. I think that's where the space pivots. I think if the bull comes back, you might see a little rise in the non-Ponzi-nomic side of things again, but you never know until you get there.
Right.
Yeah, that's cyclical.
To continue on from this, kind of what you were just talking about, Degen, moving away from the moving away from Degen, in this space and moving more toward real use cases, real utility, away from Ponzi-nomics and random rebasing tokens with unsustainable APYs, things like that. You guys with MOD have built, a scoring rubric for projects. One, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your current rubric, and two, where you want, how you see that rubric evolving with this space over time, or is there anything you're already looking? Oh, he just dipped. Not dipped, probably disconnected. Well,
So I guess we do
let's
care
go.
what internet.
First rug of the night.
Sorry, I got cut off there.
welcome back. It's funny that it happened while I was asking you the question, but to just reiterate that, I'd like you to talk about your current scoring rubric and, are you looking to the future? What do you see that evolving to? Do you see it evolving, or is it going to remain fairly static?
All right, yeah. So the current rubric relies. We try to break it up a little bit, primarily between security measures taken and then tokenomics, so to speak. Ultimately, we want to have add more categories, if you will. But primarily, because we've seen a little mix of both. We've seen projects that didn't look that good from the beginning do well, and we've seen projects that look like they're going to do great and do bad. But primarily, we're looking into, do they have an audit? Who do they have an audit with? Right? Because I've seen things on shill channels, and people can go on Fiverr and get $100 audit. Like, that's not a real audit, obviously. Same with KYC. Same thing applies. Who are they KYCing? Are they reputable? Personally, kind of with all the security services, I've seen, and this is a personal belief, but I've seen recently where you have a lot of projects popping up that are tokenizing this, which I personally disagree with. I'm not going to name names, but there's been a couple recently where where projects try to offer project services, but also are a project themselves. And it's kind of, from what, the track record so far, from what I've seen, it never goes well. So I personally, I like to think, if your services you're providing are quality, there's no reason to tokenize it, right? The biggest names in the space don't have tokens that people buy into to provide security services, right? And then on the other side of the rubric, kind of goes into your tokenomics. Is it, how much do they raise? Because we've seen it where they've raised so much in pre-sale, there's no buy pressure at launch. Or what's the APY? Or is it too high? Is it sustainable? Is it too low? Everyone's always been trying to find that equilibrium that seems enticing, but is sustainable at the same time. So we kind of go down all of those routes, and even looking at the team, a lot of people invest in teams. Are they doxed? Are they not? Is the information they're providing accurate? It's easy. It's not as hard as people think to create a fake LinkedIn profile and whatever new social with a couple of follows, so on and so forth. And then, kind of roadmaps, but we don't go too heavily on roadmaps because, let's be honest, most roadmaps have not come to fruition. So we kind of just do an overall, and we also usually go on their Discord, and any questions we have or information we can't find, we ask them, and we also feel like that's a big part of the whole process is, because right there, in their Discord, asking them, how fast do they respond? How do they respond? What's the tone? All of those things can tell you a lot, right? Based on the reaction that they give you.
Right.
And going forward, I guess where I see it is, for us, we would like to develop it even more so. And we do take suggestions from our community even to further develop our rubric. And I've seen other groups similar that maybe aren't even project service groups or whatever, but and I've seen them pop up and kind of do the same thing, educating people. And in that aspect, I think there is a healthy level of sharing of, okay, this group is, looking at these sort of things that we haven't looked at before. We definitely feel like, that's a great thing to look at in terms of, doing your research on a project, so on and so forth. So, I mean, going forward, I think, our style of group or whatnot, we'll keep advancing. It's kind of part of the cat and mouse game I mentioned earlier. And, and I hope overall we are able to educate the community even more.
Yeah, awesome. That definitely hit those points. I'm looking forward to running Gauss through this at some point. Last thing, because we just hit the hour mark. We haven't gotten too many questions today, but I did want to talk, Atlas, with you. How much have you announced about the project that you're working on to your community, or how much can you talk about that, or can you talk about it at all? The next thing that you're working on with CryptoLink.
Yeah, so we did release some of our Q4 roadmap. We recently had a town hall. It's all recorded on YouTube. It's currently up at the printer.financial YouTube. But yeah, so we're releasing one of the major things that we're releasing is true cross-chain DEX that does auto routing on all the chains, which allows for a true any-to-any token swap, where you can be on any chain, go from any token to any other chain, just one click, and that all routes through our in-house bridge. So it's really not only a demonstration of our technology, but I think it's a really good utility to give to the DeFi market. And we really everything that we've been doing with this project is trying to find utility for the space where we wish we would have things easier. So I'm sure others would too. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing out of our roadmap.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hinting at. I didn't know how much I could exactly say there. But yeah, I appreciate that, because I think, a lot of what we're seeing in the space, and that touches on it, bridges touch on it, a lot of that's interoperability. I know it sounds like Drew doesn't agree with that one, but I think it's a big, very, very large pillar of where we'll see this go and where it kind of needs to go. We need a lot more ubiquity, seamless experiences for end users, things like that. So I'm looking forward to the future. Degen, Drew, Atlas, anyone have closing topics? Anything we want to agree or disagree on?
No, I just kind of want to hit home that I like what Atlas has got going on over there. I really do. I think it's like that's actually pretty sick. And if anybody knows me, I don't really give props to a lot of projects and creators out there because I just, for lack of a better term, man, I just think that there's not much good in the market right now in terms of people delivering value. And I don't even call it utility anymore, because that's one of those keyword things that everybody uses. Oh, I have a rebasing token. Oh, utility. No, like this, he's actually delivering a use case. I would be interested in hearing a little bit more about, and not on this call. This is just me kind of personally talking to Atlas about what you guys have going on over there, because dude, your guys' kind of project and like trajectory kind of aligns a lot with pre-send. You guys are making people safe on swap. We're making people safe on transactions, right? Like sending out of a wallet into an exchange, sending out of an exchange into a wallet, sending from a MetaMask to an AVAX wallet, FTM wallet to Coinbase or something like that. Even though you can't do that, obviously, and that's where pre-send comes in. It tells you can't do that, and you're not going to lose your $100 if you just try to spend. So, man, this was a good call, guys. I appreciate just being in the talks, man. So much love. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I definitely love this as a format. So we have two questions that I'm going to allow Alex to take over and ask those. But before that, I want to say thank you all for, joining us. These conversations are amazing and I think much needed in this space. And I look forward to speaking with you each individually more in the future and potentially working with you, some of you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having it. Been a great chat, for sure.
Yeah. Alex,
So
Yeah.
So we do have two questions. One of them is from a guy named Gil in our Discord, and this is for Drew, and he asks, "Are the Wolfer NFTs still available?"
So Wolfer sold out, but to answer the question in relative terms, absolutely they're still available. I do believe we sold them at $500 whenever back in June when we were selling them, but they all sold out very quickly in 17 days during a bear market. It was actually really awesome. It was like a real true testament to that kind of like pivot, but you have to buy them on OpenSea. They are on the Matic network, and some of them are listed for Matic, some of them are listed for ETH, but floor price is like a full ETH now. So they've almost tripled in value in just a couple of months. And a lot of that has to do with pre-send, I'm not going to lie, because we do have a 10% equity stake in pre-send, and a lot of people think that's going to be a major solution. And a lot of people are buying Wolfers because the pre-send round is happening right now, and Wolfers got the first right of refusal to mint pre-send, so that could have helped bump the price. So yeah, check OpenSea. It's probably going to cost you a pretty penny, but I think over the lifetime of Wolfer, it'll probably come out in the wash a few $100 extra. So thank you for that question.
So just to reiterate, the only way that you can currently buy a Wolfer NFT is through OpenSea and not through necessarily like Wolfer.finance.
Yeah, you cannot mint them. They will never, for Wolfers, what our treasury has right now, you will never, ever be able to mint an NFT for them ever again. And it's because we don't want to be a revolving door. We also don't want to be a Ponzi. We're bringing in a bunch of money and then paying out people with other people's money, stuff like that. And we have our treasuries already built, and we're giving away 95% of our income. So only 5% of the income actually goes to me for running the entire institution. So yep, you would have to buy it on OpenSea, and that's the only way.
Perfect. There was a small follow-up question, and this is more for towards anyone. Is there any projects or, and this is, I believe, by Gil as well, is there any projects that have any upcoming NFTs offerings that they can hint about or drop any alpha about? And I guess if the answer is no, then the answer is no.
We already, I kind of touched on it just for a brief second when I was answering that last question, but pre-send, which is the wallet transaction security software, it's a Chrome extension. I'm involved in it. I'm essentially, I hate saying stuff like this, but I got deemed this. I'm the CEO of the company. I hate saying that. I'm one of the co-founders. I don't call myself CEO. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not infallible. I still have to, my kid walks off. I still have to go find him sometimes. So I'm not perfect. So I don't want people to put anybody on a pedestal, right? But at the end of the day, pre-send is in launch mode right now, and you can go to presend.io and you can sign up on the whitelist. And man, this thing's it's pretty crazy. I'm not going to get too far into it because I know we're already over the time on the call. So hopefully people just go and do their own research. They can go to my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Drew Wolfer. You'll see me. I'm the Viking braids guy that, does funny stuff, has fart jokes on his videos. I try to entertain people, keep them interested. Go check out my pre-send videos. Go to the website, get in the pre-send Discord, Wolfer Finance Discord. You'll see. And the whitelist minting comes up October 1st. pretty good timing for that question. We closed down the whitelist sign up on it's in like 3 days on Thursday at midnight Central Time. So like think Chicago, USA. We closed down at midnight, and then the minting opens at noon on October 1st, which is a Saturday. And if you're not on the whitelist, you're probably not going to be able to get an NFT, because Wolfer actually brought in over $1 million by themselves in the institutional round, 1.3 mil, and then they minted out over 3,000 of the NFTs right now, and there's only 7,500 available. So it's probably going to go all out in whitelist. So I would suggest, if you want in, get on the whitelist.
And from my side, I do know of at least one coming up, but I can't touch on that at the moment. And sorry, I hate being that guy, but it is what it is. And I guess if that was the last question that you guys had, I had one for Atlas and Drew myself. Since, like Drew was saying, they are similar in certain aspects. And the question being is, do you think that if major wallets accepted domain names, that there would be less of a need for either or of your services?
If major wallets accepted what? I'm sorry.
Domain names. So like a domain name would be like degen.eth, right? Because most people can't remember the whole hash of their wallet, correct? But if my wallet was just degen.eth and it was an EVM wallet, right?
Yeah, definitely. So
right.
It depends. It depends, because a lot of for pre-send at least, I can't speak for Atlas. I'll let him speak for himself here in a minute. But for pre-send, it's more or less going into and out of exchanges. Like, okay, here's the issue. Here's like one of the main issues right now is, and I'll give you 2 examples. One is Binance Coin, BNB. Technically, that is on Binance Smart Chain, and it's EVM compatible, okay? So all 0x addresses accept any 0x address, right? They accept any EVM token. So compatible token. Now, so I could literally come into my MetaMask, right? And I could send my Binance coin on Ethereum's network into Coinbase. Here's the issue. Coinbase doesn't have Binance, but Coinbase is going to accept it, and then it's going to get lost. So
right.
Yes, if they did the domains, but you're still going to run into that same issue that I was just talking about with the EVM, right? Now, there's a secondary issue, an example that I'll give you, ledgers, okay? So there's this issue, and I've run into it myself, where you'll send from a ledger into an exchange, and you'll send it on the Bitcoin chain, right? Just the regular Bitcoin chain. This is Bitcoin. And you'll put in that address, and then randomly Ledger, without asking you, without telling you, unless you've done this before, you don't know this is happening. It'll upgrade you to SegWit, and then you'll lose all your money if you send it on the regular Bitcoin chain. So, man, thank God for test transactions. And the difference in between you sending a test transaction and pre-send doing it is it does it automated, right? And it does it more efficiently. So instead of you having to spend 5 to 15 minutes on a test transaction and maybe having to send $1 to $10, pre-send will figure out what the minimum amount allowable to send on said chain is, and it'll do it for you, automate it, and it'll have an API call. And it's much more complicated than that. I'm dumbing it down. So I'm sure my dev Jace, he'll be mad that I said just an API call, but it's not just an API call, guys. It's incredibly intense, and it'll tell you faster than what your test transaction would do. And if you're sending, $1,000 and it takes you 15 minutes to, get that test transaction through, and that $1,000 only costs you 0.1% of that transaction, which is literally $1, and then guaranteed 2 cents, so $1.02. My guess is most people's 5 to 15 minutes is going to be worth more than $1.02. So yeah, it would help, but there's some things that's not going to solve, right? Which is where pre-send comes in.
Right.
Provisionally patented, by the way, guys, just so that everybody knows. No stealsies.
Atlas, did you want to answer that too? Bueller.
So I'm assuming that might be a no from Atlas, or he might be disconnected.
I don't know. You
All
go
right.
on to the last question, and I think that's it then.
Okay, so this question is actually from myself, and we might have touched upon it before in the past. But my question is what do you think accountability looks like in the future for DeFi? And this is a general question for everyone. Like, would it be a slap on the wrist, or would there be more substantial consequences, such as, I don't know, prison time or being blacklisted off of a market? What do you guys think?
You cut out right whenever you said it. What is the initial question? I'm sorry.
What do you think accountability looks like for the future of DeFi? In the future of DeFi,
Ability.
yes.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's going to be a lot similar to how it is in traditional finance right now, where and a lot of people would consider that slap on the wrist, right? Because you've got people that I mean, let's be real. Bernie Madoff. I mean, that dude. He got some time, man. He had to go do some real time. But then you've got people like Jordan Belfort. He went and did a few years, but he made off with millions and defrauded a lot of different people. And think about that however you will. But I think it really depends on how they're handling financial fraud elsewhere. And what it's really going to depend on is the jurisdictions. So the things that we're running into right now, why people, because these laws are already in place, right? And even though crypto's not regulated, you still can't just go and steal from people, right? So the problem we're running into right now is jurisdictionally, it's all effed up. So what I mean by that is, in order for somebody to be held accountable that's anonymous or even maybe necessarily not anonymous, there has to be a certain level in the United States, at least. I'm speaking purely from the United States. I can't make assumptions or anything about other nations. But there has to be a certain amount of people that come in from the same exact jurisdiction. And when I mean like a certain amount of people, I mean hundreds, thousands of people have to come in and complain about said project, business, person, whatever, right? And if I'm calling like 10 people in, say, Miami that don't that are complaining, the feds aren't going to take that seriously. Once you start getting hundreds and thousands of people complaining in the same jurisdiction, that's where they'll go to, start holding people accountable. So, man, it just really depends on if they can find these people, because a lot of people are anonymous, and then what jurisdiction they're in. Are they United States based, or is everybody that's complaining a United States person, but this person lives in the Maldives, right? So it's really just going to depend on mainly jurisdiction and how they're handling it in the real, like the I guess I can't say real financial sector, but like the traditional financial sector.
So, were you going to say something, Degen?
So from my take, it's kind of, not to sound like a broken record, but it depends on how they handle regulations. What is a commodity? What is the security? I mean, in two, I guess, closer cases, one we touched on, Tornado Cash. Obviously, that dev was incarcerated. And then another recent one I've seen is, there is a court case against Strong right now. So, to me, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm not going to lean one way or the other, whether it's just a fine. But I don't think with the sorry, tongue tied. With everyone being anonymous, I don't think, I think if they want to find you, they'll find you, right? There's so many ways that they can go about that. So to me, it's just, purely first they need to decide what's a commodity and what's a security. And I kind of find it interesting with how they're going about it right now. Kind of going at Tornado Cash without really having anything laid out, any parameters or structure of regulations, so to speak, that are clear cut and everyone needs to follow.
Atlas, did you want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I think you'll see that probably the same thing. Back Kevin Mitnick when computer crimes first started to be a big thing. That the laws weren't up to date then, but that didn't stop them from enforcing it. It just looked really messy. So I agree. I think it's going to be really messy. But I think out of that will also come more clarity.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to add in my opinion on it that I've spoken about before in wrapping up, that part of what we're doing and looking forward to is being able to hold projects launch with us accountable as a layer one, as a business. So if if a bad actor does make it through the cracks, we have agreements in place. We can pursue them legally regardless of where they are in the world. And I think a lot more accountability needs to exist in the space, for one another, projects holding others accountable, communities holding their projects accountable. So that was an awesome question, Alex. We've gone well over. I actually have a meeting coming up here in a few minutes, so I want to say thank you guys for joining us today. It's been an amazing conversation. Thank you, Drew, Degen, and Atlas. Again, looking forward to speaking with you all and working with some of you. So, I look forward to working with each of you. I just don't want to show favoritism or drop any potential alpha. So,
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, much love, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day. Thank you to our audience for coming in and listening. And for everyone who listens on YouTube, we're going to have outro music, some great lo-fi beats that you can listen to for a few minutes. Have a great one, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.